with Town Square Buzz, and I'd like to welcome you back to our discussion with City Councilwoman Geralyn Kever. Geralyn is up for re-election for District Seat 2 with the city, and we're talking today a little bit about our city's issues with regard to growth, taxes, and one thing I wanted to share with you is I attended the sustainability seminar that the city held a few weeks ago. And it was interesting to me, the people sitting around the tables, as we did our little breakout groups, I heard over and over again a very incongruent message from our citizens that they came to McKinney because they love what we have to offer. As you mentioned in one of our previous discussions, they love the quality of life that we have. Great education, open green space, parks and rec that we have to offer. However, they don't like our taxes. Of course, we have pretty high taxes, the highest in Collin County. And as we look at that, how do we address the situation with we don't want any change because we like who we are, as our community has our own identity. We like the way we are, but how do we address that issue with our taxes being high?
Well, I don't really, interestingly enough, I don't really think that's an incongruent response that you heard. I think that you can do both. I think you can respond to a concern with regard to the tax rate, and then you can also maintain and preserve that hometown feel, that appreciation for nature that our citizens have come to appreciate and hang on to. That message and that branding, if you will, that kind of sets our city apart from other cities in Collin County. And the way that you do that is, I think that here's a response. I've sat down again with lots of folks, and I'll just relay one recent conversation. We were talking about, the neighbors that I was listening to were talking about what made McKinney special. And they went to that same point that you just mentioned. And they said, we've got this unique sense of feel about when we walk into downtown, when we go to Adriatica, when we go to Craig Ranch, when we go to Tucker Hill, and I'm quick there, but you could keep going. But whether intentionally or just as our city has evolved, we have these core neighborhoods that have developed, okay? And they're important gathering places, and people appreciate the natural terrain surrounding these areas. But I think as we grow, we've got to continue to add that economic development that you and I talked about in the last segment. That's mission critical to allowing us to be able to grow in a way that affords us the opportunity to continue to offer quality residential neighborhoods, a sense of place, those gathering opportunities, those venues that our citizens really appreciate. I mean, where else in Collin County can you walk around the streets in a historic, authentic downtown? There are other synthetic responses to downtowns. You don't get the authenticity that we have here. And I would say when you go up, when you go to Adriatica, there's a unique feel there. So I think, and you got to wrap nature around all of those places. So that's where that sense of appreciation for nature. And really, Angie, one thing that you might have heard too when you were at that seminar is this whole response or this whole message of sustainability.
Yes.
What does sustainability mean? For most people, not all, but for most people, their home is one of the most significant assets to them, okay? So how do we continue to build in a way that our assets, our homes maintain their value, our corporate developments, our retail developments, that they maintain their value? And I would submit to you that there's a way to do that. So there's a way to grow responsibly, to take advantage of our natural terrain and our topography. There's a way to build, to be responsive in terms of sustainability and the way that we build ourselves out. And there's a critical core component in terms of being able to attract economic development that allows this whole equation to prosper and to keep going, even as we get bigger.
So if a resident said change is difficult, we all know that. For most people, change is a difficult thing. And those people who've been in McKinney, even if they've been here 3 to 5 years, this is what they know. Or 1 year for that matter. As we move forward and residents become aware, council has discussed the possibility of allowing 12-story buildings on 380, for example. How would you convince them that that's in the best interest of our city?
Are you talking about that one issue or just multiple issues?
Well, just let's use that as an example. We've got a 12-story. It sounds like what your solution would be is to convince our public or share with our public that we would still integrate the green spaces around the surrounding buildings, and that because of the economic issues, that could be in our best interest in our growth.
Okay. So what I hear you saying or asking me then is that maybe there's a trade-off sometimes between development and the perception of loss of green space or natural beauties. I think the response that I would offer is that we have to be strategic about where we plan for. If we say we want an office park, I mean, where should an office park locate? If we say we want significant economic development, where is it most sensible, most logical, least intrusive to maybe our residents for that to occur? Most people would say along major arteries. I mean, most would say no, to have a major development. 21 but yeah, most people say, look, okay, I'm sitting here, I'm not going to name your street because you probably don't want me to do that, but you probably don't want to look out your window and see maybe a corporate office park in your neighborhood. But is it sensible that, would it be strategic to have one locate off of 121? Yes. Off of 75? Yes. Off of 380? Yes. In certain areas, I mean, I think, with certain exceptions. Right. So again, I think this whole idea of planning and strategically looking out over the lay of the land, taking into account that it's important to our residents, it's important to our citizens to have that commercial tax base so that they're not we're not asking them to weather the brunt of all the, the costs of providing citizens. Most people get that. And we just need to be smart about where that occurs.
Okay. Now let's talk a little bit more about our own economics in the city of McKinney.
Okay.
We have, as probably every city in the country, been faced with something of a budget deficit, although ours is really not nearly as bad as many places. Our firemen haven't had a raise.
Nor have our police officers, have our civil servants.
Exactly.
Right.
So that being said, what would you propose that we do as a city to address those issues? Because we have people coming into our city, and that helps our tax base, certainly. But at some point, we still need to offer services to those individuals who do move into our city. So growth is that blessing-curse thing to some degree, often.
So are you asking about city staff primarily, or are you?
If you had to assess where we spend our money, what do you think are priorities that we need to address as we look at budget issues?
No, that's a good question. You can think of the city's work, the way we spend our money. If you think of it like in a bucket, at the very bottom, kind of in a hierarchy of needs kind of a response. At the very bottom of the bucket would be those non-negotiables, those things that most people say, hey, turn on my water, my tap, I want water coming out. Flush my toilet, I want the toilet to work. I've got to have my trash picked up.
So the basics.
Look, I put safety's right there. I mean, you have to have, you dial 911, you expect a response. Okay, those are non-negotiables. And then you layer on top of that those, and that's when you begin to exercise discretion in terms of how you use your dollars. So what do our citizens expect green green space and upkeep, and do our citizens, what kind of roads do we need to put down, what kind of costs are associated, so you can just kind of see that you layer on top of that. And then there are other things that we do that are maybe at the top, not meaning in priority, but just in terms of less of a non-negotiable, like, I don't know, if I pick one, there might be controversy around it. I don't know how much money we give to a certain event or whatever. Sure, might not be as important as wouldn't be as important in most folks' opinion, I believe, as maybe having the water flow through their house. So I think you've got to start at that level. I'm going to tell you, there is no pleasure in having a budget where we are not able to reward our employees, not give our employees their raise for 2 years. That's all our employees.
Yes, right.
There is no fun in that.
Right.
At the same time, we're sensitive to the fact that we're not going to raise the tax rate.
Right.
I mean, I'm not alone in this. I mean, our council say, we're not going to raise the tax rate. So, we ought to feel at least some positive response to the economy. We've tightened our belt. We've cut our budget,
right.
And yes, we haven't been able to give our employees a raise. I think we really got to work on that this year. And I'm just everyone around the council table that I've heard from has said, look, it's mission critical to reward our employees, and how can we make that happen this year? So then you begin to look at all those in that bucket. You begin to look at all those. All the city responses, and you have to prioritize those.
Okay.
And that's what we've got to do. And some people call that, zero budgeting, but you start with what you've got to provide, the non-negotiables, and then you look at every city service, every, I don't want to say amenity, but every response that the city provides, and you weigh that against your priorities. Okay. And again, I would say that a priority for me personally is to be able to respond in terms of compensation. I have empathy for our families that haven't had a raise in 2 years, and that if we experience a growth in our tax base, our revenues, from my perspective, first fruits should go to the salary response. But
so to wrap things up.
This has been so fun.
Conversation. I know we could talk for
Can't we
weeks.
just talk forever?
I know. So many other things I would like to discuss. Absolutely. You've mentioned that economic development is very important to you, and one of your priorities, and addressing what you call the low-hanging fruits in some of our segments in the next 5 to 10 years. So when you're out talking with your constituents, what are you hearing is important to them?
All right. I am hearing that, interestingly enough, as I sit around the table, why did you come to McKinney? I came to McKinney because I wanted to raise my family here. Our schools are really great. I like the way that I like the nature part of our community. Those things these are just, I can't
Name us the 5th best place to live in the country?
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't want to leave these segments without bringing that up. But with all the challenges that you and I have discussed over all these segments, isn't it satisfying that still from the outside people look at us and say we're doing a lot of things right? So I would say that safety. They want a safe community. They want a community where they can grow their kids up. And you know what? They like the hometown, friendly feel. I can't tell you how many people I know have lived in McKinney. They have left, gone to places far away, and they have come back because they say this is a special place. For my mind, McKinney, Texas is a special place, and people know it.
So finally, Geralyn, tell us something that the public doesn't know about you.
Okay. My parents named me after St. Gerard. If I had been born a boy, I would have been Gerald.
Oh, okay.
But I'm Geralyn, and I'm not really saintly or anything. I don't know why and I have to
quite
go back.
I'm sure.
No, I wouldn't say it either. But people ask me all the time, that's an unusual name, and so maybe people don't know that I was named after St. Gerard. There you go.
I'm sure they don't. And that's something good for them to know. Thank you so much for your time, for joining us.
Absolutely.
I appreciate your willingness to participate in our interview. Check back with Town Square Buzz as we continue interviewing our candidates. Next, we'll be talking to those who are running for the at-large seat. We would like to invite you, our readers, to send us your questions. We'd like to know what you think. Check us out at townsquarebuzz.com. You can comment on our interviews on our website by clicking on the comment box and adding your thoughts. We want to know what you think. Town Square Buzz is the voice of the community.